will make off with your children. He'll come after them in the night.
No!
No one will be safe until his head is mounted on my wall.
The solution to your problem is quite simple. The only way to get what you want is to become human yourself.
Drive away your worries and cares at this drive-in theater, where you will see the finest motion pictures of all time, soon to be released.
Hello, I am C-3PO Human Cyborg Relations. Welcome aboard the Star Speeder 3000.
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mangello, and this is show number 401 for the week of April 5th, 2015. I'm here to help you have the best possible Disney vacation experience and bring you a little bit of Disney magic wherever you are with this podcast, videos, blog, live broadcasts, special events, my trivia books, audio tours, and 102 ways to save money at Walt Disney World book. You can find everything over at WDWRadio.com. So this week, I invite you to please join me aboard my Walt Disney World Wayback Machine as we travel back in time more than 60 years to the real origins of Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. We'll look at how and why the attraction came to be and why it wasn't originally meant for Adventureland. We'll discuss the Disneyland original and then take a really close look at the Tropical Serenade at Walt Disney World, as well as its similarities and differences to the original, unique features, its new management, and why it returned to its original splendor. I'll then have the answer to our last Walt Disney World trivia question of the week and pose a new challenge for your chance to win a Disney Prize package. And if you want to learn how you can get even more exclusive content, rewards, events, and products like custom Magic Band covers, monthly scavenger hunts, logo items, special call-in shows, and more, visit WDWRadio.com/support and find out how you can be part of WDW Radio Nation. Then stay tuned to the end of the show for more announcements, including upcoming Meets of the Month and more of your voicemails. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show.
Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Buenos dias. Buenos dias and caramba. Up here I am. Up here in this here teepee canoe. I have a few thousand things in my feathered brain to tell you about Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room.
If I ask you to think of a classic Walt Disney World attraction, what comes to mind? Is it an attraction that's classic to you and your personal memories? One that's been there since day one? Maybe one that had its origins in Disneyland? Or what about one that I think might fall into all of these categories that could be found in Adventureland, in Walt Disney World, and Disneyland, and it's appropriately called Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room? And this week, we're going to take a close look at the attraction as it stands today, as well as its origins, changes, inspirations, and much more. And joining me on this sort of combination DSI/Wayback Machine is a man who loves adventure, romance, mystery, tropical rivers silently flowing into the unknown, the unbelievable splendor of exotic flowers, the eerie sound of the jungle with eyes that are always watching, and like Walt himself who said those words, Ryan Wilson from the Main Street Gazette loves his Adventureland.
Look at all the people.
I'm going to assume you were not trying to do an impression at that point.
No, I thought about the impression. I was like, you know what? I don't have the talents for that kind of an accent. I'll just do the line.
So, you know, it's funny that we haven't touched on this before. We've talked, obviously, about adventure and our love for that land. And I think in terms of talking about this one that has such a rich and storied history, you know, obviously in the way we normally do these things, we set the Wayback Machine way back when. And, you know, starting at the beginning here certainly doesn't mean we start at the beginning of Walt Disney World. It doesn't even start at Disneyland, because with so many of the great treasures that we still enjoy and appreciate in both parks, this one really does start with Walt Disney, and it starts with Walt pre-Disneyland, right? This is like before he even sort of, I think, had this concept of Disneyland. He always had this idea of sort of bringing his two-dimensional movies to life, right? I mean, even I think, going back into the late 40s, early 50s, he had sort of started talking to like patent attorneys about patenting this ideas of dimensional animations, this idea of bringing these things into the three-dimensional environment. And when Disneyland opened in 55, the thing about Walt that we always keep talking about, Ryan, is he was frustrated by the limits of technology. Like, he had these ideas, but the technology hadn't caught up. And maybe the closest that he was able to come with at the time were the very basic sort of hydraulic and pneumatic systems that they saw on the Jungle Cruise.
Definitely, and you look at Walt and you always wonder what was going on in his imagination, because I can only imagine the things that he actually saw that we've even yet to see. I almost liken it to that scene in Iron Man where he's talking to Tony as a child, and he's talking about what the future holds, and you'll be the one who's able to fix this because I can't do it with my time and my limitations. Walt very much had those very similar problems in the fact of this is where mechanics and engineering and the imagination have taken us to this point. And this is what you can do with that. And and he always was pushing the boundaries of how to tell his story, where to tell his story, that everything could be his story.
And, I think a lot of people say, well, Lou, I know where you're going, right? You're going to talk about how the Tiki Room was meant to be a restaurant, but there was a time that predated that where it actually didn't begin in Adventureland, but he had an idea for Main Street USA where he wanted to have a Chinese restaurant where a Confucius character would sit and chat with guests. And he had Wathel Rogers, sort of the grandfather of audio animatronics, and Roger Broggie actually mock up this Confucius figure, which was going to be on this Liberty Street and Edison Square section of Main Street that never came to be. But again, even at that point, they still quite couldn't get that Confucius character right.
No, it goes back to those limitations of his time and the things that he could and couldn't do. And he was always fascinated, when it comes, especially with the Tiki Room, with the, the little mechanical bird, or these figures and the dancing man and all these aspects. And he knew that it was there and it was coming, but he just couldn't quite get it there for Main Street and for the Liberty Street that they had planned.
Right, and so as time progressed, the idea evolved. He says, all right, well, you know what? Scrap the Chinese restaurant. This is Liberty Street and Edison Square. We really need to have something that talks about freedom and liberty and America. We know about the patriot that Walt was. And so now they wanted to do something that would be more America. Oh, a salute to all nations, but mostly America. And this is where, and I'm going to sort of tie you back into going to Disney's Hollywood / whatever it's going to be called studios, and looking at the animatronic figure of the dancing man, Buddy Ebsen, right? That Walt himself directed, because he knew that they were getting closer to this idea of building a full-scale model. But I think Ebsen is 1/8 the perfect size. They wanted to see if they could get that sort of dance routine perfected there, and then they would figure out how to do the full-scale animatronic for what he hoped was going to be a show about the presidency, which would eventually evolve into Walt Disney World's Hall of Presidents.
Yeah, it's that whole thing that you always hear with Imagineering. A good idea never dies. It's always going to be being worked on somewhere, some way. They're going to go back to it when they need something, and they had this great figure, and the goal was to get to full size, and they always thought everything was models. I mean, you look back at Pirates, you look back way back when, and everything was scale model, and that's how they mapped out their attractions. That's how they mapped out everything, and that was how the camera lenses they would use to see how that would look through the eye of the guest. And so it was always that scale, build, full size.
And I love the story of really how this came to be, because it almost sounds like it's made up, right? Walt loved to travel. Adventureland is really sort of reflects Walt's personal love of travel, and he's vacationing with his wife in New Orleans. And I've also heard the story told in Europe, but from what I understand, it actually is New Orleans. And he finds this little mechanical bird that can sing, and its heads move, and the beak moves in sort of in time with the songs. And he's like, look, if they can do this in this little bird, my Imagineers are going to be able to do it too. And he takes it back, and he has his Imagineers basically reverse engineer this toy bird. Quick side story. Years ago, I had the privilege of going to the Walt Disney Archives as part of a D23 event that they held. Coolest thing in the world. Dave Smith is there, and he brings out the bird. Like, people are freaking out about the Oscars and the props. I'm like, cheese and crackers,
Did you see
man.
the bird?
It's the bird. Like, and I remember Dave Smith is sitting, and the bird still works, and he's winding it up, and I'm like, oh, for the love of all things, like, put on some gloves, man. You got like Cheeto cheese on your hands, and you're touching. But it's this tiny. I mean, maybe Ryan, it's 8 to 10 inches tall. This tiny, tiny little thing. And his Imagineers are able to reverse, and that bird really was the genesis of what we have today in audio animatronics.
Absolutely, and this is going to be the first attraction with audio animatronics, and it was one. And when you start looking at what happens with Disneyland, it's the first air-conditioned building they have in Disneyland because they needed it to keep all the computers cool, to keep all the birds under control. So the aviaries outside in the heat. This aviary is much more my style. But it was this little bird, and I think you're right with New Orleans. That's what I've typically always heard it as. He had them take this bird and say, we can do this bigger, better, stronger, and $6 Million Man Later version. We have the Tiki room.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he realizes, okay, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. This bird is the key. But he says, you know what? Let's abandon this Chinese restaurant idea, right? Like, he likes the idea of the restaurant with animatronic figures, but he says, let's push aside the idea of Confucius. And I like this whole thing with the bird. Look, Walt loved Tiki culture, right? It very much was sort of in vogue at the time. He loved Polynesian culture. Look, Disney World Polynesian Village Resort and Bungalows is very much inspired by Walt's idealized vision and version of what he thought Polynesian living and resort vacations would be like. So he said, let's make this in Adventureland. He was going to call it the Tiki Hut. It actually wasn't going to be called the Enchanted Tiki Room. It was going to be called the Tiki Hut, and it was going to have this very Polynesian theme. It was very close to the Tahitian Terrace and Plaza Pavilion, so they could share the kitchen there. And there was actually a press release that the company issued that said, Walt Disney is creating a restaurant. And just as his full-length animated films, True Life Adventures, and Disneyland pioneered in their fields, Walt's creation might alter the course of many full-course meals. So it sounds like, pardon the pun, the bird is in flight. This is definitely going to happen. And then I think what happens is, you get excited about an idea, and then you have to pull back and say, well, time out a second. How long does the average meal take? All of a sudden, logistics, right, and timing start coming into play. If people are there, but, an hour, how many guests are really going to be able to see what is a breakthrough in technology? So he said, you know what? The space is small. The turnover is going to be very, very slow. Instead of the restaurant, let's do a show. Let's do a 15, 20-minute show called Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, which opened in June of 1963.
Yeah, and you had this thing where you look at, people aren't going to leave the restaurant because they're going to sit there, they're going to want to watch again and again. And as long as they're sipping on their coffee, which was coming out of the fountain stand in the middle of the room, nobody was going to go anywhere. and Walt always wanted to, he wanted to make everything available for the masses. He wanted everyone to be able to see these creations and see these stories. And so it was like, let's turn this into something that is more functional for everyone. And then we get the first version of the Walt Disney Enchanted Tiki Room in 1963.
And I think it would have suffered. I think they were visionaries to realize that it actually would have suffered the same fate as Walt Disney World's Adventurers Club, where people go in and they stay for the show and they sit there with a soda or a coffee or a small meal and might stay there not for 45 minutes, not for 60 minutes, maybe for a couple of hours. Hey, like you said, it's the first air-conditioned room. It's a great show. And the interesting thing was they went from 0 to 225 instantaneously. It wasn't like you walked into the Tiki room and there was 1 or 2 animatronics. There's 225, so there's a ton of things to see. And again, something so new and so unique to people who, and look, one thing, people didn't even realize initially what was inside. That's why they created the Barker Bird, to call people over and say, hey, you guys have to come in and see because you don't know what you're missing inside.
Right, and you even have this Barker Bird, they're even breaking the fourth wall with this Barker Bird, who's talking about, all the relations, talking about how his speech has been recorded. This is the actual figure telling you how it works, so that you're going to come inside to see how if you take that one figure, that's the preview you get, how much grander is the entire visuals you're going to have.
And I think you hit on a really interesting point, was that not just the Barker Bird, but the hosts of the show inside broke the 4 walls, right? You weren't just sort of watching a show like you watch a movie. They were talking directly to you. Like, they knew that you were there. It was almost, interactive, like, oh, these birds are alive and they can see me and they're talking to me, the one guest that they're looking at inside the show. And I think that was really what was a lot of the appeal for the attraction. But again, other than something that just people had not seen before.
It definitely wasn't. And it was the way that the perches would move, and it did look like they were talking to you. And there were quotes and lines that are meant to engage those guests. You're the bald guest, or pardon, madame. They were trying to get you to understand that you were part of the show and you were engaged. And even up through the exit, they're engaging you to get up and interact with them.
And something else too, and again, think back to 1963. It's this new attraction, unlike anything guests have seen before. There was a few other things that made this attraction in Disneyland unique. One, it was owned by WED Enterprises, right? Which obviously became, Walt Disney Company became Walt Disney Productions, but Walt's private company, WED Enterprises, and it's hard for us to grasp because we think it's all one big happy company. But because it was operated by WED, guests actually had to pay a separate admission ticket just for the Tiki room. And 75 cents today might not sound like a lot, because that's not even like a mocha latte frappuccino, whatever. But if you wanted to see the show that you didn't know what it was, you had to pay an additional 75 cents.
Yeah, and I think that's where this Barker Bird comes in. Juan comes in and he's trying to get you motivated to come in, to spend that extra money to come in and see everything that these birds had to offer. But it was so unique. It was so groundbreaking. There were no pirates. There were no Haunted Mansion ghosts. This was the first attraction that took this technology and brought it into the mainstream for attractions.
And if you think back, when it first opened, it was sponsored by United Airlines. And you might be saying, well, I don't get it. Like, what's the connection? Well, obviously, United Airlines is trying to let people understand, hey, we can take people not just to, destinations. We can bring you to these Hawaiian Islands. We can take you to Polynesia. So it makes perfect sense to have United Airlines, but in 1976, Dole Food Company replaces United Airlines, continues sponsorship to this day. Thankfully, all the stars aligned, and because of that, we have the infamous Dole Whip.
Yes, the Dole Whip. Yeah, sit out there in the lanai. Look at the Tiki gods. Have your Dole Whip. Take it into the room with you. Why not? Because it's all good.
And so you mentioned the Tiki gods. That's something else that they. The pre-show to the show, especially in Disneyland, was a show in and of itself, right? Because the show is 17 or so minutes. In order to keep guests occupied in the queue. Remember, there wasn't very much to do. You're standing outside. They put all these different gods around the perimeter of the area. And those two, they're not audio animatronic figures, but they sort of move a little bit. They talk to guests. They keep people entertained and sort of forget that they are waiting in line.
Right. It's that perfect example of the edutainment aspect. You're getting these, very very Tiki-esque looking gods who are going to talk to you. They're going to tell you who they are. They're going to have some visual or some element that shows what they are the god of or goddess of and how they interact with the world around you. But at the same time, it's going to make you laugh. You have the god on fire. You have the little baby gods coming out of the tree. It's all there to keep you entertained, and you're not realizing how quickly your time is passing.
And I think what made this attraction and continues to make the attraction very popular and a classic, you can put it in air quotes or not, is like any good attraction, like any good Disney movie, I think, it's the soundtrack that makes it complete. And everybody on the planet knows the Tiki 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 Room because, once again, it is a virtual masterpiece by the Sherman Brothers.
Right. Even before you got to that, I was like, oh, we're going to the earworms, aren't we? We're going to the Tiki Room. Right. It's an amazing soundtrack. You have the opening song, which sets the tone for the entire show. But they also were smart enough to use songs that people knew from other mediums. Whether it was "Let's All Sing Like the Birdies Sing" or the War Chant. You had all these other pieces that people would know, and they brought them in, and so it becomes a whole show that people can interact with. Yeah.
So you've got the Tiki Room, "Let's All Sing Like the Birdies Sing." The finale sort of performed by all the birds and the flowers and the tiki statues, and then a little bit of hi ho, just to,
just to throw it out there.
and look, certainly, Walt tapped into those people who were the best of the best in terms of the voice actors. So you have Thurl Ravenscroft as Fritz, comedian Wally Bogue as Jose, Fulton Burley as Michael, and Ernie Newton as Pierre, and some of the other people doing some of the other background birds. But it's those four characters, those four hosts, that I think people instantly. Those are the ones that talk to us, right? They all represent different nationalities. There's Jose, who is obviously Mexican. Michael has an Irish background. Pierre, obviously French, and Fritz is German. And if you look very carefully, originally the colors of their feathers actually reflected their different heritage.
Right. You would have Jose, who would have the white, the green, and the red. You'd have the green with a little bit of the orange for Michael. They all had their feathers sorted so that you could tell very visually from where they were from. But I do think it's those voices that bring those characters to life, and you have such an amazing set of actors here bringing those to life that no matter whether you recognize their voice from other attractions or from films or their stage productions, they had such this quality of life to their voices that it doesn't matter what the decade is now, you're still recognizing that you still are sucked into that tale.
And again, I prefaced by talking about this as a classic attraction. And in 2004, the Disneyland version of the Enchanted Tiki Room closes for refurbishment, and it reopens as pretty much the same exact show, other than new audio animatronics, a digitally remastered score, a new sound system. So they're all sort of effect-based things, but the show itself doesn't really change. There might be a few. I think there was a couple of different shows, a couple of different songs that might have been taken out to shorten the show to sort of again increase the guest throughput. But other than that, the show that was updated in 2004 was really similar to the one that opened in the early 60s.
Right. It's kind of that thing. When you get it right, you keep it there and you don't mess with it. And they've had this right since day one, really. And it keeps drawing us back in, whether it's the actual characters, the effects of the windows and outside, on the lanai. It's just been done so well. It's done so right that it does keep us coming back time and time again, even if just to have an air-conditioned place to eat our Dole Whips.
Listen, quick aside, you talked about the windows, which is one of my favorite effects. Mm-hmm. I know you haven't been yet, but if you think the windows in the Enchanted Tiki Room are good, just wait till you see Trader Sam's Grog Grotto at Disney's Polynesian Village. It's an attraction in and of itself.
It's funny because I was thinking about it because I had been to Trader Sam's out in California, and I look at that window and going, yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with the new, like everything at the new home down the road, as it were. I can't wait. I've actually been playing with those ideas and thoughts in my mind for a while now.
Listen, buddy, you need a research trip, and I will be there to help you along. So
done.
But so look, obviously, the Disneyland version is so incredibly popular. I mean, guests are floored by what they see. There's a high repeat factor, believe it or not, for the show. It clearly makes sense. Obviously this was one that needs to be replicated in Walt Disney World, save for the fact that, like, Disney learned from Disneyland, wanted to make the property and the space in Walt Disney World bigger. The theater here was larger, but the show was pretty much the same. Although it was not called the Enchanted Tiki Room, it was called the Tropical Serenade. It was sponsored by the Florida citrus growers, and to Disney's point about realizing it would be popular, it opened as a D-ticket attraction, which, remember, if you remember the A3 ticket books, you're pretty close to being, one of the gatebuster attractions. Disney knew right off the bat that this would be incredibly popular.
And if you think about it, just as you're walking through Adventureland, not today, back in 1971, you're walking through Adventureland, there's this giant pagoda, this Balinese pagoda off in the distance at the very end of the land, because that was where Adventureland ended. This was the big thing that you were being drawn towards in Adventureland, and you didn't have the flying carpets. It was this great, the Sunshine Tree Pavilion with this Balinese artwork and this Balinese decor. And that's where you were going because you had heard about California, or you had seen something, and the Tropical Serenade was where you wanted to go. Whether or not the Barker Bird was going to get you in the door or not, you were headed that way.
Yeah, and I'll actually reference you, and I'll link to it in the show notes. I did a full show about the Orange Bird a few years ago after it came back, and how this character was created for the Sunshine Tree Terrace and the Anita Bryant and the Sherman Brothers song, and how unique this pavilion was, because again it had this citrus swirl bar next to it and a new character created by Disney for the Florida citrus growers, and the changes in sort of the Disney Barker Birds. But at the time, that was a $3 million investment into this bird attraction by the Florida citrus growers, so they very much bought into it very early on too.
Okay, yeah, and that was in 1969. They knew what they were getting into. And it was just listed as a tropical bird show. Like they just were trusting. They had seen what had happened in California. They said they knew they had it, and with what had happened with Dole and the amazing Dole Whip, the citrus swirls were going to be that big. They hoped, being next door to the pavilion, and so it made sense for all the right reasons. And
Disney did a couple of things to differentiate it from the Disneyland version, right? Obviously, instead of having this outdoor area with the tiki gods or this lanai area, they created a covered area with lines going back and forth that had this little waterfall on the shrine where their Barker birds, the two birds, would sort of come out and give their little show. But really, the important thing to note, too, is the building itself, right? In Disneyland, it was kind of put into a relatively small space. You literally could almost walk by it if you're not familiar with the layout. You would see the Dole Whip stand, which is tied in very much to the queue area, but you might walk by, where in Disney World, they give this a huge pagoda. I mean, you can see this, not just as you walk into Adventureland, but we talk about the theming on the opposite side. You can see this building, this sort of weenie that draws you in, even from the Frontierland side as well.
Right, and that's why if you look at the building, that's why there's water buffalo up on the roof, because it does kind of fit into the Frontierland theme and the cattle side of the Bali Island, the Balinese culture. You have all of this great ornamentation. It is drawing you in. It is this giant piece, because at this point you do know what you have. In Disneyland, where it was going to be sharing, at the time when it was thinking about being a restaurant, it was be sharing a kitchen with two other restaurants. It really is a place where you could blink and miss the building as you're walking by on your way to the Jungle Cruise or, at this point, Indy. But in Florida, this was the marquee thing that they were trying to get people to in Adventureland, and they were selling it for all it was worth.
So I want you to try and think back to young, wee little Ryan Wilson.
Oh, no.
And I want you to think to the late 80s, early 90s. Was the Tiki Room a must-do? Was it a place to go if you were tired or hot and just wanted a little bit of air conditioning? Can you remember as a kid, what was how attractive was the Tiki Room? You obviously know where I'm going with this, but how attractive to you was the Tiki Room?
It was. I think part of it for me was I was always the citrus swirl kid. Like, the citrus swirl was my snack. And
you sound like a cowboy. I'm the citrus swirl kid.
The citrus swirl kid. Oh, I got a new nickname, don't I? But it was my snack, and so I was always there by it. It was right there for me. The what kept drawing me back to it wasn't necessarily the birds. It was the tiki and the totems that came to life, and the drumming tiki. That to me was just amazing. Like, this was something that's not supposed to be alive, whereas the birds to me made sense that they sure, they're pairs. They could sing on some level in my head as a kid, but the drum, like the magical qualities that they were imbued with to come to life and start drumming and start singing, that to me was amazing. And so that brought me back time and again, I think, to the point where my parents were just out of their mind of, we can't even take him for a Citrus Swirl because he'll want to go see the drumming Tikis.
See, I remember my dad really liking this attraction, right? And I think I was, but Pirates is right there, the Jungle Cruise. Like, I was more interested in the attractions, right? The things that were sort of the, more ride-based than show-based.
Right.
As I got older, I began to appreciate it more. I think because of once I understood the story and the nostalgia and the connection to Walt and going back to Disneyland, which I hadn't visited until I was much older, I started to like the attraction for different reasons, right? And it's always the ex-girlfriend effect, like you're closing the Adventures Club. No, it's my favorite thing.
Wait, no, I love that place.
Don't go. Right, when they say that they're going to close the Tiki Room, like, no, come on, the Tiki Room's my favorite attraction in the entire world. Well, it might not have been, but I think what had happened was, as time went on, I think the repeatability factor maybe for the Tropical Serenade might not have been there. Right now, all of a sudden, you don't just have Pirates in the Jungle Cruise. Now you've got Splash Mountain. You can hear the people on Splash Mountain. You can hear people on Big Thunder Mountain, all Space Mountain. Now you've got all these thrill rides. Maybe the Tropical Serenade might seem like it's your dad's attraction, right? That's the one that mom and dad want to go to. So Disney closes it on September 1st, 1997, for a very lengthy rehab. I mean, I think it doesn't reopen until April or so, April or May 1998, as the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management. Right?
And you can see from the sign that it's definitely new management.
It's definitely not, and I think that was the point. This is not your mom and dad's Enchanted Tiki Room. Yes, right. Jose, Michael, Pierre, and Fritz, they're there, but now hey kids, we've got something for you. We have Zazu from The Lion King, and who doesn't love Iago from Aladdin? What could possibly go wrong, right? So, and look, even in the exterior, like even in the queue, right, the quote-unquote Barker birds are different, right? You've got William and Morris, Don Rickles, which is, again, maybe your mom and dad would recognize the voice, but younger people knew Phil Hartman from Saturday Night Live.
Right, and these were the bird agents for their clients who had purchased the Tiki Room and were going to be the new management for the Tiki Room, and they're working out their share and all that stuff. But it had a very much more of a Hollywood feel to it, whereas the laid back island feel from the original version, maybe now you understand that it's not the same.
Right, and look, they're trying to make it relevant, and I get it. But by doing that, and by bringing, look, you can have Morris talk about going to sign Donald Duck, but when William is talking about that he's going, that who cares because I've got the Mighty Ducks.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you're locking that into a moment in time, the same way the Timekeeper was flawless until Boys to Men comes out singing Motown Philly. You're like, oh, wait a minute, this attraction was obviously built in X year. That's what you start to do. The 4 original Tiki Birds are there. Jerry Orbach brings in a new voice, who was Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast. You may know him from Law and Order. The song is the same. The Tiki Room is there. You're like, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden, love him or hate him, Iago from Aladdin comes out, sort of interrupting the show as it goes on. And you can see very quickly that, look, Gilbert Gottfried's voice is very unique and brought a very different feel to the attraction.
And not only the voices, it was, if you even looked at, Zazu and Iago, you could see the different animatedness. The birds these birds are much bigger. They're much more animated. They have they have that same quality that you would expect from the show or from their movies, but their size was so much larger than the other birds, and it was very much this, this fresh coat of paint for the show, but nothing else. They were the pieces that had changed, not the rest of the room, and they were talking about their plans on how they were going to revitalize the whole show.
And it's interesting because if you look back, and obviously hindsight being 2020, you can almost get a sense that the Imagineers and the story writers were already preparing for the debate that was going to happen, right? Because Zazu, level-headed Zazu,
Right.
is saying, please don't mess with the Tiki Room. It's a classic. It's perfect. And Iago's going, no, listen. It's time. This has been the same thing for 30 years. It's time to, to bring it up to speed and get rid of this old show, this old tired show, because he's going to toss his crackers.
And you can almost imagine that these were identical conversations that the Imagineers had with one another. They're like, listen, we're just going to script it from this debate that we're having in room right now, and we're going to go with that. And and then you have, you don't want to upset the Tiki gods, or in this case, the Disney gods and everyone who's going to be upset about the changes. And it's, you can almost see that verbatim. They just changed names. The names have been changed for protecting that kind of a bit.
Right, like they were like Oa was the Twitter of 1998.
Yep.
Like they knew people were going to. So that's kind of what Oa represented. Like, listen, if you change this, the gods Twitter is going to be very, very unhappy. And as obviously he was right, because the lightning strikes and the lights go out, and the Tiki poles start chanting Oa Oa, and this is where the interesting things happen, right? The music changes, right? You bring in music like Hot, 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 and all of a sudden it clearly is not the original show.
No, you've gone from Polynesia down to the Caribbean and down to Miami and South. I don't know what's happened with we have salsa music now, but it's very much different. You have much more black lighting effects here at this point, neon, and I don't even know if it's like to take a butcher knife and cut the differences a part of what was and what will be.
Yeah, and look, I understand, and I think we understood that by putting songs by Gloria Estefan in there and Conga and Hot, 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 it makes it more relevant, right? Quote unquote, on paper, it seems to make it more relevant, but I think two things happen. I think it gets dated very quickly, and look,
right.
it lasted 13 years, which is relatively a long time, but I think that Iago in the movie, Iago in Aladdin is a great sidekick character, right? He's somewhat funny, he's a little annoying, but he brings in a light bit of humor. But I think here, he was kind of obnoxious, and he was really sort of interrupting a nice show, and it maybe you certainly didn't get the warm and fuzzies from Iago.
Stop the music! Are you listening to me? I said stop the music! Now listen, you bird brains. If you're gonna keep your jobs, you gotta get hip. I know all about it, see?
No, maybe from Zazu. Maybe you understood Zazu was trying to be that voice of reason. But you're right, with the dating of the music, it does. It's just like Boyz II Men. It's going to set you right here, right now, and we see it time and again in this in this period of time, whether it's Ellen's Energy Adventure or it's Timekeeper, you get yourselves locked into these things, and unless you're going to come back every couple of years or so and fix the music and fix the soundtrack, it does tend to lock you in, and it becomes dated almost quicker than the original attraction would have been. But I think you're right. My wife loves, we joke she has this love of secondary characters. Like every movie she ever watches, her favorite character is the sidekick somewhere, but sidekicks aren't necessarily the person meant to run the show.
Yeah, and again, thinking back to when this was, right, in September, in the late, 2000s, whatever it is, I think things happened in that show that probably wouldn't happen now, right? Like, so at the end, and it's a throwaway joke, right? Iago talks about, even though most of the guests are probably out, if you stay till the end, like you always should, especially like in the stretching room at the Haunted Mansion, stay as long as you can. If you stay till the end, Iago talks about how tired he is, and he's insulting the Hall of Presidents. Like, I'm going to go take a nap in the Hall of Presidents. I'm not sure that joke would play or be allowed today. And even he says goodbye to Zazu, and then Jose says, nobody laid an egg except that guy.
You're right. There are things I think there that made it through then that wouldn't make it through now, and where every attraction is giving its own set of its own quality of life, as it were. Everything's respected for what it is. And this was obviously going to poke fun, and maybe these were the people who were saying, no, don't change, don't change. Oh, you know what? If you're going to, go ahead, throw these jokes in and see what happens.
Yeah. And it's funny how things work out, because I think in 2011, the show's about 13 years old. I think it's starting to clearly show its age. I think the music isn't as relevant. The jokes aren't as funny as maybe they were in 1998. And coincidentally, a small fire happens to break out in the attic, or near in the rafters of the attraction. Nobody was hurt. It wasn't anything bad. The sprinklers went on. But from what we can sort of piece together, it sounds as though that Iago, surprisingly, was damaged by the fire, and some of the parts of the attraction had some other water. Maybe Oa had finally had it. And
right, he'd been singed so much in the show, they just taking it to the next level and bringing it to life for us.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of from what we've been able to piece together is there are a couple of figures that are damaged that need to be repaired, whether it's the feathers or some of the fabrics that were used. Iago seems like he's beyond repair, so it seems like it's about time to make another change.
Yeah, and I don't know, there was two different Iagos in the attraction. There was the early Iago, and then the one that was sort of burnt by Oa. Mm-hmm. You wonder which one might have actually been burnt. But, timing being everything, I think, again, going back to the boardroom in Imagineering or wherever, the conversation that takes place is, okay, well, now what do we replace this attraction with? And I think the timing was, I think had the timing be different, we might not have had the Tiki Room come back. And what I mean by that is, after Disneyland's Enchanted Tiki Room reopens sort of for the park's 50th anniversary, they see how popular it becomes again. Now, Walt Disney World's 40th anniversary is coming back. The sense of nostalgia is in the air, because of social media. It's palpable, right? Disney is able to watch and listen and learn what people are talking about, what they want. And I think they smartly decide to reopen the attraction, not under new management, not with a new show, but it is once again Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, the original Disneyland name. Yes, the show is a little bit shorter by about 6 minutes. They did cut out some music and a little bit of dialogue from the original show. But for the most part, we have very close to the original Disneyland show.
Right, we have for our generation, it's the ADHD version of the Enchanted Tiki Room. we cut out a little bit to make it a little bit shorter, but yeah, they've returned everything back to its natural glory. They've the fountain's back where it belongs. We have all of our pieces back now. And even if it's a bit shorter, it is that original show, and now it's not become. It's almost gotten to the point where it's no longer dated. It's hit that point where it's timeless.
Right, and it's back to being a classic attraction. Even the pre-show, again, which is shorter. We're trying to get more guests through. We don't want guests waiting outside as long. You've got Dal McKinnon's. He's the wildest ride in the wilderness guy. Sebastian Cabot. It is, in the best possible sense, it is your dad's Tiki Room, right? But it looks better. It sounds better. And I remember taking my kids in August of 2011, wondering what their reaction was going to be. Were they going to be like, hey, where's the characters that we know? They didn't care. They loved it. They loved the classic music. They loved finding out when I said, this is what the Disneyland version was like and is like. And I told them the story about Walt, and they really wrapped their arms around it and fell in love with the new attraction, and then said, you know what? We didn't like the other one as much. We like this one. And I was afraid they weren't going to like the old-time music or whatever. Right. There wasn't going to be no relatable characters tied to a movie or an intellectual property.
Yeah. Well, I've always said you have two of the smartest kids I know. But it doesn't resonate, I think, with all kids. I can remember, since it's reopened, going in, and I can't think of a single time I've been in where I haven't seen, preschoolers and young children getting up and dancing in the middle of the show and coming up where there's, a little bit of open floor space there, and just, giving it all they got because they're bought into the entire show. It's, what's old is new again, and it really never went out of style. It's just maybe we didn't appreciate it for what it was.
And I think, as you look at the Tiki Room today, right? Describe it for me in one word. How would you describe the Tiki Room?
I think I may have already said it. I think it's looking at it, whether it's inside, outside, that first glimpse of the building or the songs that it's singing. I do think it's hit that timeless category. I think that's where it falls now for me.
I look at it and I think about Walt, and that's why I said I like the fact that it is Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. I think there's something endearing about it. I think there's something charming about it. I think the fact that it's simple. Look, go back to Richard Sherman. It's right. Simple. It's singable, right? It's something that the entire family can enjoy. I like the characters in there, even though they're not ones that you see. You can't. Well, maybe you can buy. Maybe you can't buy a T-shirt with the characters on it, or little figures of the characters, but they're characters that we like. Right. And I wonder, if we're doing the show 10 years from now, where's the Tiki Room going to be? Like, how long is this attraction able to stay the classic original 1963 Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room?
Right. Does it hit a point where it becomes, again, where like it's old is new again now? Does it become old again? Does it fade at some point from our nostalgia, our rose-colored nostalgia? I don't know. I think I do know that you had about 10 one-word answers right there. But otherwise I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I guess endearing was probably the word that and maybe this is the question to ask the listener, right? Describe for me on Twitter at Lou Mongello, and make sure you also include at Maine ST Gazette on Twitter. Give me one word for you that describes the current Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. And also come to the show notes and tell me, do you love it? Do you go every time? Like, I'm curious to sort of get a finger on the pulse of how people look 5 years after this grand reopening. How do you look now on the Tiki Room? Is it a must-do? Is it oh, hey, I'm hot, I need to sit down for a while? How do you look at the Tiki Room now? And maybe what do you see for the Tiki Room in the future? Like if I say, Ryan, you're in charge of Imagineering Adventureland right now, what do you want to do with the Tiki Room? Do we leave it? Is it good? Or do you want to do something different?
Right. Do we go back to Walt's idea of a little restaurant there and the birds still sing, but now you can get, now it's a juice bar and it's Trader Sam's, Tiki Bird bar, and you get your non-alcoholic versions out there. I don't know what the answer is necessarily, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, it's funny that you mention the dinner show idea. I don't think it's obviously appropriate for there, but did you know, I'm sure you do know, that actually that great idea never died, and in fact did come to life directly in Walt Disney World, not in the theme parks, but over at Disney's Polynesian Village, because the Polynesian Village, the Polynesian Luau, the Spirit of Aloha dinner show, was directly tied to this idea of creating this dinner coupled with, South Pacific entertainment. And even John Henshin, and I think if you love Imagineering, you need to read Designing Disney, Imagineering, and the Art and the Show. He talks about how, if everybody was seated and served at the same time, they'd finish the main course together, they could start the dinner show, and we'd sort of be able to rotate these people through. It didn't work in Disneyland. It didn't work in Adventureland. But Hench decided to replace this idea of food service in the center of the room with creating a South Pacific themed show, and actually talks. He said, look, and I quote, although we were unable to try the dinner show approach at the Tiki Room, we did produce the Luau dinner show at the Polynesian, and it was a tremendous success.
Yeah. And it was such a success. We've seen it elsewhere. You look across back at Fort Wilderness, my old stomping ground, and you have the Hoop-de-Doo review. There's all these kind of entertainment things that they did finally figure out what the right formula was.
Yeah. All right. So last question for you and anybody who's listening: who of the four hosts is your favorite? And why?
It's I've always had a fondness for Pierre. I think that may have something to do with the fact that my mom's side of the family, it's very French, and there's always this thing back there of that. Or maybe I just love the accent. But we're gonna go with Pierre.
I think I have to say Fritz just because of the Thurl Ravenscroft.
Yeah, it's close second there.
Right, and he did one of the gods, I think, outside of in Disneyland too, and obviously he's got a lot of connections to Mansion and other attractions as well. So yeah, I am so curious to hear what people think about the attraction, the word they would use to describe it, what they might want to see change, if anything. And then, of course, I also want them to go, but I don't need to hear your reaction because I know you're going to love visiting MainStreetGazette.com. Ryan, man, I am continuously amazed by what I get to learn from your blog and the cool pictures that you post, and you really take us way back all the time, man. And I love what you do there. I'm not just saying it because you're here.
I do what I can, and I appreciate everyone's love for it.
Awesome, brother. We got to do this again soon. Lots
Definitely.
more to cover.
Always.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Tahua'ila, tahua'ila, e huenila, pili ko'oluala, ututu'ila, ite ko'ila, hanuli puitu pahala. Tahua'ila, tahua'ila, e huenila, pili ko'oluala,
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World history or see how well you pay attention to the details in what you see, sometimes even in what you hear. If you think you know the answer, you can enter for a chance to win a Disney prize package. Before we get to this week's question, let's go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So on our last show, number 400, I actually wanted to see how well you paid attention to what you hear, because I gave you a quote and I asked you to identify where in the world you may have heard it. And the quote was, "All these people think I'm talking to them, but I'm really just talking to you." And again, thank you and congratulations to the hundreds of you who entered and got this one correct. I don't know if you're Muppet fans or Waldo fans or just love Jim Henson's Muppet Vision 3D at Disney's Hollywood Studios, but you all knew that it was in fact the spirit of 3D, Waldo. And you were again playing for all 6 of my virtual audio walking tours, a copy of my new 102 Ways to Save Money 4 at Walt Disney World book, and a mystery gift from my personal Disney collection, which I'm in the process of purging up on eBay. I randomly selected one winner from all the correct entries, and our winner last week is Peggy Aldine. So Peggy, congratulations. I'll shoot you an email, get your shipping address, and get your prize package out to you right away. But if you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So obviously we were talking all about the Enchanted Tiki Room and the history and the changes through the years, and I actually specifically left out one little bit of information because I wanted to use it for this week's Trivia Challenge. Because while the original Orange Bird was created as a mascot, it was also a walk-around character, which sort of acted like the Barker Bird, right? A way to draw people over to the Sunshine Tree Terrace and get people to come in and see the show. But after about 20 years or so, the original Orange Bird was replaced by a new, quote-unquote, Barker Bird that stood outside the Enchanted Tiki Room. So your question this week is to tell me, what is the name of that second Barker Bird that stood outside the Tiki Room from about 1992 till about 1997 or so? You have until Sunday, April 12th at 11:59 p.m. to email your answer to contest@wdwradio.com. Again, you're playing for the audio tours, a copy of my 102 Ways to Save Money 4 at Walt Disney World book, and a special mystery gift that I will include as well. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and taking a look back at the Enchanted Tiki Room with me and Ryan. I also want to start off by saying thanks again to so many of you who are members of WDW Radio Nation. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support and friendship, and I hope that you are enjoying some of the special content and our private Facebook group the personalized Magic Band covers, the logo gear and backpacks and t-shirts and scavenger hunts and everything else. I want to thank new members like Ryan Blanding, Patrick J. Knapp Jr., the oh-so-speedy Mark Brinkerhoff, Matt Galen, John Bailey, Andrew Gowan, Paul Siopik and family, Dean Gavo, Morin Marshall, John and Elaine Tevens and family, RJ Lucia Jr., Brenna Dudley, Rob Sean Barrow, and so many more. To find out more and become part of WDW Radio Nation, visit wdwradio.com/support. Don't forget that in addition to the podcast, please join me every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for WDWRadioLive.com, where I talk about the week's Disney news and then stay and chat with you for about an hour or so. It's a live video broadcast and interactive chat that takes place again every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, over at WDWRadioLive.com. Also, hopefully you're following me on Twitter at Lou Mongello, Facebook.com/Lou Mongello, same on Instagram and Pinterest. Also, be sure you're following me either or both on Meerkat and Periscope, as I'm doing a lot of live broadcasting using those apps as well. You can search for those in the iTunes App Store. Also, be sure to visit WDWRadio.com. We have an amazing team of blog writers that's pushing out some great content every single day, and you can subscribe and get that content delivered for free right to your inbox. There's also new videos, a free newsletter, a free app for your mobile device, and lots more. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have a question you want answered on the show, you can email me, lou@wdwradio.com, or call the voicemail, be heard on the air at 407-900-9391. And if you've been listening to the show in the past, or you are a brand new listener, as much as I love connecting with you guys online and having conversations there, I believe that nothing beats a handshake and a hug, and that's why I do monthly meetups every month in Walt Disney World, as well as other events on the road. Visit the events page at WDWRadio.com or Facebook.com/WDWRadio for more information. Our next meet of the month is going to be at the Tangerine Cafe on April 25th. That's a Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Why did I choose that place? Because Avengers Age of Ultron comes out just a few days later. I'm super excited, so I thought we would tie it in to the bonus scene from the first Avengers movie and have a little shawarma meet at the Tangerine Cafe in Morocco in Epcot. Flower and Garden Festival's going on. Should be a lot of fun. Anyone and everyone is invited. It's open to everyone. Obviously, it's free as well. To find out more, again, visit the events page. Also look for other events on the road. And to see other places, I'll be speaking at other conferences like New Media Expo next week. I'll be keynoting at Podcast Movement later this summer. Or to find out how to book me for your conference with your business, or to come speak at your school, visit LouMongello.com. There you can also find out how I might be able to help you, either in a small group coaching session or one-on-one, to help you turn whatever that thing is that you love. Turn that passion into your profession. I want you to get that same excitement that I feel every day about what I do. Thanks to you, because you allow me to share my passion for Disney with you. Big thanks to Mouse Fan Travel. They are my official and recommended travel provider. Whether you're coming to World, Land, Cruise, Adventures by Disney, Aulani, anywhere on the planet, the team of agents at Mouse Fan Travel not only will ensure you get the best possible prices, they're always looking for available discounts. They'll help you book your dining, all at no cost to you. Go for the discounts. You're going to stay for the service because they treat you like family. Visit them over at mousefantravel.com and go to celebrationspress.com and find out how you can order or subscribe to Celebrations Magazine. Quick thanks again to everybody who has rated and reviewed my 102 Ways to Save Money for and at Walt Disney World book over at Amazon.com, including Luke Lawson, Stuart Talbot, Jimmy Jones, and Mackenzie. We have almost 200 reviews there. If you have the book, if you like the book, please tell your friends and go and review the show there. You can find out more and order the book by visiting Disney102.com. And as always, my friends, and you are my friends, whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like the show, please help spread the word. Let others know about it. Tweet out that you're listening. Come by on Facebook. Keep the conversation going there. Share links and comment about your favorite shows. And please go to iTunes, rate and review the show there. We have more than 930 reviews. Would love to get to 1,000 five-star reviews. Thanks to some recent reviewers like S. Disney, Disneyana, Warrior, Monk, Book Guy, Jill Long in Ireland, BizQuick21, and Daniel J. Gates, who I can imagine is saying this in his best impression of the guy on TV. I don't often rate podcasts, but when I do, they deserve it. Thanks to you and everybody else who's rated and reviewed the show. Visit iTunes or go to wdwradio.com/iTunes with instructions and a direct link to where you can go and rate and review the show. And thank you again Every day is a gift. You have given me the gift of your time, which I know is your most valuable commodity. And I really do mean it when I say how sincerely grateful I am to you and for you individually. And I want you to feel that same way. So if you're not where you want to be, right, that should be the motivation that you need. And just start taking small, positive steps in action, and slowly you will get there. And as Walt always said, always keep moving forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. I hope you have a ridiculously amazing week this week. So until next time, see ya.
Hello, Lou Mongello. This is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man, and I want to wish you a wonderful 400th show. Just an amazing accomplishment for an amazing man. I'm so proud of you, man. Have a great day.
Hey, hello, it's Chris. Chris from New York. Mixed team on the box. Just touching in. Really enjoyed the latest podcast with you and Deanna and the kids. Really cool. I had no idea they had all that food available and those choices at the value resorts and, where you were at. Anyway, long story short, just saying hi. Give me a shout back when you can. I sent you an email. And you take care of yourself. All right, buddy. Take care. All the best to the family and all the best to everybody on the radio. All right, buddy. Take care. Bye.
Hey, Lou. My name is Adam Rodriguez. I just wanted to say I really appreciate what you do. I came about you on the internet, I think on YouTube about a year ago, and I cannot stop listening to your podcasts, your videos. I'm in the box. Eiler 1998. It's a great show. I love what you do, and it keeps me inspired. Lou, I love what you do. You're a great guy. This is everything you do is great. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you.
Good morning, Lou. It's Justin. I am walking my way to the world of Disney, getting prepared for work. And I just want to let you know, I just want to congratulate you on your 400th episode. And I'm looking forward to seeing you real soon. As always, keep up the good work. And I'll see you very, very soon.
Hello, Lou Mongello. It's Darlene Nagy from West Seneca, New York. And it is March 27th, 2015. And that means we are now 65 days away from our WDW Radio Alaska Wonder Cruise. And with our WDW Radio group, it's going to be a fantastic, epic adventure. And I am so excited for it. 65 days, oh my goodness gracious, 5 more days and we're 2 months away. That is just amazing. Amazing. It seems like it was a long time ago that you announced it and our bucket dream list came true. I'm trying to do as many bucket list things that I have on my list, and this is going to be a check off for one. And hitting Vancouver, Canada to go out of is going to be another bucket list check off because we wanted to get up to that area. So thank you so much to you and Becky for making these dreams come possible. And I hope everyone has a magical, magical weekend. It is 30 degrees in Buffalo, New York, and I am telling you, it's actually still snowing here. So it's not really sticking. We did get some slush yesterday. So I'll be ready for Alaska when I go. Talk to you all real soon.
You've got a friend in